What up? What up? It's the Athletic Hockey Show for May 14th, 2026. That is the correct date. It's the correct year. I'm smart. I can do things. I'm Sean Gentili, joined here with Shayna Goldman. We are going to talk about Colorado and Minnesota. That's going to happen shortly. We also have a nice chat with the Carolina Hurricanes general manager, Eric Tulsky, and a talk with Hailey Salvian. It's a jam-packed show. Shayna, let's just start, though. This is breaking news to some degree before we started recording, though we knew that it was coming, I think, in some regard for a couple weeks now. The Edmonton Oilers have moved on. They have fired Kris Knoblauch. Connor McDavid will have a sixth NHL coach whenever the next regular season starts. Three thoughts from me here, and you can tell me how this lines up with your thinking on it. The playoffs were rough for Edmonton and for Knoblauch. All four of their centers are banged up. That's a tough break. Doesn't matter who you play. Doesn't matter if it's Edmonton or Colorado or the Atlanta Thrashers or, the Maple Leafs in 1956. It's a bad deal. At the end of that, though, he looked and he sounded like a guy who didn't have any answers, and the players didn't have any either. So that's the kind of stuff where you're like, okay, are there exacerbating factors here aside from just health? And that roster's a mess, and that ain't his fault. So where are you at on those three factors kind of interplay here?
If you wanted to say everyone deals with injuries and he should have been a little more adaptable, I would have that conversation. If you wanted to say maybe he took the team to its limits the last 2 years, again, sure. Especially like when you start as strong as he did and you take a team to back-to-back Stanley Cup finals, the expectations are going to be high.
Yeah.
That being said, I would have done two things first. I probably wouldn't have put the blame squarely on his shoulders. If I'm management, I would look in the mirror and see the roster that I decimated. I would give him more capable defenders who play with a little more pace. I would give him a more capable goaltending situation. Maybe not tie up a ton of cap space in Tristan Jarry and Trent Frederick and things like that. I don't know. We're seeing Brett Kulak last night, and you're thinking sometimes you have to make a move for Tristan Jarry. So the roster issues don't fall on Knoblauch. The other thing is I would have hired him a full-time defensive coach a lot sooner. The whole we're going to break and let Paul Coffey fix it every time is an issue. And you could say, well, it's his staff. Sure, but if you're management and you're running the show, there should be a little overreach there to be like, this is what we need. So I would have given Knoblauch another go next year with a better assistant coach, with someone who can implement a little more defensive structure and then see how things go before making the decision now, especially after, say, they can't get Bruce Cassidy. Like, let's say that's not a possibility for them. And you look at, what else might be available. I would be thinking, you know what? The guy we have is probably better than some random guy we're going to pick out there.
Yeah, and I think, you mentioned the Paul Coffey factor, too. I think that more than anything set, in a lot of ways, that set the trap for this spring because, he didn't want to hire Paul Coffey. That's not Kris Knoblauch's hire, right? So you set the tone with, you kind of push Mark Stewart to the side, who was the defensive guy on that staff. Paul Coffey wasn't someone that Chuck Knoblauch. My God, it's a miracle I haven't done that. It's a miracle I haven't done that 100 times over the course of the last few years. He's not a guy that Kris Knoblauch wanted around, and it made for weird vibes at times from what I heard and from what I could tell around the Edmonton Oilers down the stretch. So, like, if you're making those decisions for a coach, you're telling him you got to bring this guy in, whether you want him or not. Then you got to ask the question how badly you want to retain that guy for the next season. The roster issues are just so clear and so obvious. It started a couple years ago before Stan Bowman took the job, on the July 1 where they're signing Victor Arvidsson and Jeff Skinner and whatever. That was a disaster. Those aren't Stan Bowman's fault. Everything that's happened since then is. In the way they approached not just the deadline, but trade season this year, starting with Jarry, that's on Bowman too, because he, labels Jarry, identifies Jarry as the solution to the goaltending problems, realizes very quickly that wasn't the case, and then immediately starts to backtrack and improve defensively in the ways that they got worse whenever they traded for Jari in the first place, because they send out Brett Kulak in that deal. Then you have to replace Brett Kulak, and you also have to say, like, okay, rather than trading for like a scoring winger, how do we improve here? We got to go out and get someone like Jason Dickinson, and that's how they use their draft capital. That's how they use their cap space, was to improve defensively in a way that it didn't seem like they were going to have to if they would have addressed the goaltending in a meaningful way. So that's just a classic case of roster mismanagement. Maybe if Knoblauch, were a different coach, he could have worked his way out of it a little bit more effectively. But, that's the hand that he was dealt, and that's the way that he played it. So, like, I don't necessarily view this as, some great miscarriage of justice. I don't think there's any one magic bullet here. It's not just because they were injured. It's not just because Knoblauch didn't do a good enough job against the Anaheim Ducks. And it's not just because the roster was deficient. It's all three of those things. And when that comes into play, when you don't have any one, magic bullet answer, that's when you're in real trouble. And I think that's the big takeaway with moving on from Kris Knoblauch, is that, a different coach might fix part of the problem. It's not going to fix all of it. And I think that's the single thing that should scare Oilers fans the most about the entire situation.
Yeah, that's definitely it, because you look at it and go, okay, it's not like you can just wipe away everything they did this year.
Yep.
They spent draft capital. They spent trade assets they should have to buy their way out of contracts, right? Like, they felt they had to pay the Penguins to take Skinner and Kulak, which should have never been the case. They had to pay the Blackhawks to take the Andrew Mangiapane contract. That was a mistake in the first place. The Trent Frederic
and also throw in a first round pick because you're like, oh God, Kulak's not here anymore. We got to go out and get someone like Connor Murphy to fill the Brett Kulak slot. So it's just like, it's the red paper clip game in reverse where the guy goes on Craigslist and starts the red paper clip and ends up with a house. It's like that level of degradation in reverse on that roster, and it's been continual. And I can't blame Kris Knoblauch for that. I can blame them for the lack of adjustments during the Anaheim series. Like, that's on him. I'm not saying he deserved to keep his job necessarily. They needed to do something else. But for people who think that, bringing in whatever, let's pretend that Edmonton lets them hire, that Vegas lets them hire Bruce Cassidy, that's not necessarily a fix. There's a whole lot of stuff going wrong there, and Kris Knoblauch is certainly not responsible for all of it.
No, not when there's multi-year commitments on the cap. And also now you go, okay, so the general manager that contributed to the situation, should he be picking the next guy? Should he be making these decisions on top of it?
It's a valid case, that he shouldn't. So we'll see how that goes. The Oilers offseason is it's been going on for a couple weeks, but it ain't over. There's going to be a lot more stuff that happens there. Okay. The Avs eliminated the Minnesota Wild in 5 games last night. It was a 4-3 win in overtime. It featured 2 goals by Colorado in the final 3:33 of regulation. One was by Jack Drury, one was by MacKinnon, and then the overtime winner was, of course, Brett Kulak. Shayna, I wanted to point something out on MacKinnon's game-tying goal because, and I am certainly not the first to do this, it was a crunch time shot from the bottom of the circle that he did not miss. There were some wild similarities between that one and the shot he yacked on in the gold medal game. I think the issue clearly is that shot was too easy. He needed to go far post on Connor Hellebuyck like he did on Scott Wedgwood. The dam broke, I think, for the Minnesota Wild. I that's my takeaway there. It broke a little late, but it still broke. After the second period, Colorado had a 26-3 scoring chance edge, a 22-7 shot edge. HD chances were 12-2, 2.8 expected goals to 0.68 for Minnesota. This was over the course, post first period. This was a pretty wild degree of domination by the Avs, was it not?
Yeah, absolutely. And, first with the MacKinnon shot, he's picturing in his head being handed that stuffed animal, and is like, that is not happening. That had to be the motivating factor here.
Immediately got afraid that the NHL was going to implement the losers get a stuffed animal policy. I was like, ain't happening.
Nope, not happening today. But yeah, I think it's a mix of two things, right? Because give the Wild credit for their start. They looked fast. They were jumping on rebounds. I don't think Blackwood was great in period one, but I don't think that it was all on him either. The defense looked uncharacteristically bad in period one, and the Wild looked like a team that had that desperation factor, but the Avs answered it, right? So it's Colorado pushing the pace of play and coming out with a ton of jump through the next 40 minutes that gets them here, but it's also that safe as death. You can't just defend, and it's like, well, the Avs forced them to play that game, sure, but they also weren't breaking through enough, so I think two things are true here. And it's so funny to see, you mentioned the expected goals, you see it on a chart and how the Wild essentially just, you see their season flatline. Yeah, absolute killer. But I think too, we're getting a lot of depth contributions from the Avs, and that is great, right? Because you look at seasons past, their playoff runs, and it's the depth scoring isn't there. Well, it was there, but when they needed the big guns to thrive, here's Nathan MacKinnon doing it. And then you look to the other side of the ice and Kaprizov not doing enough in that last sequence. You see the decision to pass on the 2-on-1 and not shoot the puck, which is his best weapon. And there are a few shifts like that. That's where it really comes.
Yeah, it's Parker Kelly starting the comeback. It's Jack Drury, getting him a little bit closer, in the closing minutes there, and then it's MacKinnon, finishing the job. I mean, that was the most. That feel like that. Overtime goals often feel inevitable, like just based on the pace of play, even though they're not. That one felt inevitable. Like once that game got to overtime, you're like, this is a matter of time. We'll see who's the hero for the Avs, but it's going to be somebody.
Yeah, 100%.
I wanted to finish up on a line from something Russo and Joe wrote, and it's a rhetorical question, but whatever. How on earth could this Wild team, after dominating the first period and taking a 3-0 lead with a chance to keep its season alive and force a Game 6, collapse in such an absolutely disgusting fashion? Like, I get it. We talked about the flat line. We said it was a rhetorical question. It has an actual answer. It's that Colorado's better than the Minnesota Wild. Did we think this series was going to go longer? Sure. Were there moments, especially, in games 2 and 3, where you're like, maybe Minnesota can do this? Yeah, I can allow for that. One team was better than the other one on paper, period, all day long over the course of the regular season. You factor in the Joel Eriksson-Ek injury, you factor in the Jonas Brodin injury. That is killer stuff for Minnesota because they don't have championship center depth on their best day. That is a fact. And then when you move out Brodin and you're talking about second pair guy Jake Middleton against the Colorado Avalanche, it ain't going to work, right? So every team has injuries. Every team has to play through them. These were crucial ones for Minnesota, but I think it also hinted at deficiencies in their roster, at least as it relates to teams like Colorado, particularly down the middle, where you're like, Joel Eriksson-Ek, he's a great player. We've said it for years. You and I in particular, like I feel like every year we talk about all the things he brings to that lineup, the stuff he does that in a perfect world would make him a Selke contender. Those are all true. You need one or two more of him. You can't have Ryan Hartman playing 1C or 1C or 2C or 3C minutes at this point in his career if you're serious about winning a Stanley Cup. And the fact that they were, an injury to an injury-prone player away from a full system collapse as it relates to their center depth, it speaks poorly to the construction of that roster. And for all these pieces, for the contracts for Kaprizov and for the Quinn Hughes trade and for Matt Boldy, he gets better every year and da-da-da-da-da, that's all great. But the original sin for this roster is that they do not have enough centers, and they have not addressed it in a real way. And now we're looking at a world where Charlie Coyle is making $6 million a year, and the next best center behind him on the UFA market is 40 years old and doesn't play center anymore and isn't going to play anywhere other than Pittsburgh, and that's Evgeny Malkin, right? So you're like, how do you get better? It's really tough to see, and it's equally tough to imagine a world where they have depth that can go up against the top shelf contenders like the Colorado Avalanche. It's tough, but it's true. So ask a rhetorical question maybe, and you can get a real answer. It's because they don't have the dudes down the middle.
Yep. And if any year was the year to get them, it would have been this year because they invested a ton in Quinn Hughes. And at the end of the day, you don't know what's going to happen after his next contract, right? The other part of it is while they have this goalie tandem, I keep thinking about the Boston Bruins. Like, did they do enough when they had Swayman and Allmark together? Because that was like, they had these aces in net. You had that situation. Look how it worked out for Minnesota this year. You have Wallstead. You didn't use him as a trade chip. And now you have the goalie tandem that you need. And he ends up being the starter in this situation. But at the end of the day, you have 2 years of Quinn Hughes guaranteed. You need to go all in. And I know I was harsh on the McCarron trade. He ended up being better than I expected. I still think he was a little bit overpriced, but that's the name of the game for centers. But this is not some issue that developed overnight. You need help down the middle. Even if, say, the Stars can kind of cancel each other out and you go, it's Quinn Hughes and Kirill Kaprizov against MacKinnon and Makar, the rest of the lineup, there was too big of a gap. Sure, they got through a deep team like Dallas and did it in a more dominant way than we all saw coming. You still have to make it through 4 rounds at the end of the day. The lineup was never built to do that. So they really should have invested more in these 2 years. Otherwise, it feels like, a half-assed effort to do it this year and potentially next. And then what happens? So yeah, these were avoidable issues that they definitely should have worked on.
Yeah, and it's Brock Nelson on the other team, by the way, who is like plan A, B, and C for their center depth. They thought they were going to sign him, and they didn't, right? They thought they were going to trade for him, and they didn't. So there is a bit of irony there as it relates to this center depth chart for Colorado. And they think, if they think they're going to flip Philip Gustafsson for, a championship caliber 2C in the offseason or whatever their plan is for addressing it, we'll see how it plays out, but it's going to be easier said than done. All right, we're going to hit a break. Carolina Hurricanes GM Eric Tulsky joins us next. Stick around. All right, we're back. Very excited to be joined by Carolina GM Eric Tulsky. His team's 8-0 to start the 2026 Stanley Cup playoffs. Being told that's pretty good. Eric, I'd like to know, how are you spending your mid-spring vacation? Are you traveling at all?
There is no vacation. We're working. You've seen we've gotten a couple of signings done. Also, there's always a staff to manage, and we've got staff contracts up. We've got everybody has their own issues at work, and so there's always work to do.
Mm-hmm. You guys had that break after the first round, and Rod said that experience was a positive because it provided some kind of template for how to handle the layoff. What is the process like on your end to come up with a plan of attack there? Is it as simple as leaving that stuff to the coaches in the training staff, or is it collaborative? Like how do you in your seat make sure that stuff's going the way that it should over 10 days or however long it's going to end up being?
Yeah, I mean, it is almost entirely in their hands. If I had a staff that I was worried about, I might need to be involved, but those guys are pretty sharp. Bill Berniston leads our strength and conditioning group, and he is really dialed in on sort of managing workload and making sure we have players fit to perform their best. And Rod works very closely with him and makes sure he's designing practices in a way that puts players in position to succeed. And I'm happy to stay out of the way and let them do their thing.
So speaking of players in a position to succeed, obviously a year and a half ago, you knew Logan Stankoven was coming into this postseason and going to score a ton of goals. Like we all project this one, but how does the decision to shift him to center come together? Like what's that process look like for you?
Yeah, so he had played center in his past. He hadn't done it at the NHL level, but it was not completely foreign to him. He has a lot of the skill sets that we look for in a center. And we've been looking to sort of find ways to get more skill into the top half of our lineup for a while. And one of the ways of doing that as our wing group got deeper and deeper was to move a center to the middle. Talked to him about it. He was all on board. Spent the summer with him working on face-offs and video and making sure he understood his responsibilities. Still don't know for sure how it's going to look until he gets in there. And he hit the ground running and never looked back.
Yeah, I know that, from a production standpoint, it was a little bit of a slow start for him, but the underlyings were there. It seemed like the process was there for him from the jump. So was that your vibe as well, that immediately from October on, you're like, okay, this seems like something that can work, even though the point production wasn't necessarily there initially.
Yeah, for sure. That line's been really good all year long.
Mm-hmm.
And at the outset of the year, stuff wasn't going in, and that's something that can get people concerned. But we could see they were all over the puck. They were creating chances. It's a skilled group. It's not like you've got three guys with stone hands and you're worried they're never going to go in. You knew they'd go in eventually, and it's fortunate that they've happened to get hot at the right time for us. But at no point in the year was I worried that
Mm-hmm.
group might not work.
We haven't seen a ton of production from the Aho line so far. I also don't sense much concern on Rod's part about them. What is it about their game and about maybe the team's game overall that's made that sustainable? Because in the past, it's felt like a lack of goals from those guys in particular, Aho, Svechnikov, would have been much worse news for you guys. I don't know if you're winning 8 games in years past necessarily with them getting held off the score sheet as regularly as they have been.
Yeah, I mean, they have a long history this year and previous years of being really strong, creatively offensive players who can also go against the other team's best when they need to. You're right that it has not really been going in for them in the playoffs, but Svech in particular has been all around it. And it just feels like a matter of time. Again, he's a skilled player. They will go in. They just haven't lately. There were long stretches of this year where everything was going in for him. So it's tough that he went cold, or that line went cold when we hit the playoffs, but other lines picked it up. And that's part of the value of having depth is, I say a lot, we've had a team for a long time that was good enough to win the cup if everything went our way. And we've never really had a year where we got all the breaks. We're trying to build a team that's good enough that we can win even when we don't get the breaks.
Mm-hmm.
And building the depth to manage it, even when your top line goes a little cold, is part of how you do that.
So if you look at players like Jarvis, Aho, Stankoven, we all make jokes like if you're going to build a perfect Carolina Hurricane in a lab, you're getting those guys, right? But this year we're seeing a lot of rush-based scoring chances and goals from the Hurricanes, and an addition like Ehlers obviously helps further that. How much did you actively look to try to go against the grain of the Carolina Hurricanes system and style that we know this summer with that addition?
Yeah, so I would say our core philosophy isn't really about dump and chase or forecheck. It's really about putting the other team under pressure. And one of the ways you can do that when they bottle you up in the neutral zone is put it behind them and get in on them. And we want to keep the pressure on them. The more talent we have and the more ability we have to beat them through the neutral zone and put the pressure on them in the D zone off the rush, the more we're going to do that. And so it's, just adding that kind of skill and creativity to keep layering that onto our game has always been part of the plan. Of course, you'd rather hang on to the puck if you can. We just want to keep the other team under pressure. And, Ehlers playing with Stahl and Martinook has provided a sort of different way of applying pressure for that line. In the past, that line was almost purely a forechecking line and ferocious to deal with on the forecheck. Ehlers adds a little bit of dynamic element through the neutral zone so that they don't always have to put their energy into getting the puck back.
From your end, Freddy Andersen, he's Conn Smythe shortlist. I wrote something about him for this morning. From your chair, what have these 8 games looked like for you? And is it, I don't know if I want to say gratifying, but there is how to see him perform at that level, especially, given some of the results that he was experiencing in December, not necessarily the process. What is that? What are you seeing, and how, what's the overall sense that you're getting from the way that he's playing relative to where he was earlier in the season?
Yeah, I mean, more than anything, I'm just happy for him. There is always a lot of discourse around goalies, and the truth is he's had an outstanding career. He's played very well in the regular season. He's played well in the playoffs too. There are a lot of years where, he won games 3 and 5 of a series 2-0 and 2-1, and then his team lost game 7 and he got blamed for it. And you go back at it and they only got to a game 7 because of him. And, so he has had a career where he deserved a run like this, and I'm happy to see it happen for him. And then, like you say, in this season, there were long stretches where things didn't go his way. In the month of December, our skaters put more pucks into our own net than into the other team's net. And it's hard for him to win games when that's happening, right? And, so we've finally had a stretch where things have been a little tighter defensively. Some of the times the guys had a chance, they didn't put it bar down. And he's also playing better than average for him. And, his average is high and he's playing better than that. And you put it all together and, it's been a special run for him and I'm happy for him.
Do you think the way he played coming out of the break in particular, it wasn't, you look at the stat lines, was it sparkling? Not necessarily, but it was also a step up from results wise from where he was in December and January. Was that important for him, setting the tone and kind of priming the pump for the way things have gone, over the last few weeks?
Yeah, I mean, he's one of the most steady people you'll ever meet, whether it's, shot to shot within a game or game to game within a season or month to month. He is very level headed. And so I don't, I'm hesitant to say that he needed to have a run to change his mindset because he seems like his mindset is always the same. I think a lot of people watching us feel better as they see it go his way a little bit. But for him, he's got a great mindset for a goalie. It's just on to the next play and playing his game. And it's very calm and steady and consistent.
So, how do you estimate someone will fit well in this high pressure system that the Hurricanes play? And what were the signs someone like K'Andre Miller was going to fit well within that?
Yep. So in general, I mean, it depends a little on the position, but in general, we're looking for people who are very competitive and have sort of speed of feet and speed of thought. Because to apply pressure, you need to get on the opponent and cut down their time, and then you need to be competitive enough to make it hard for them when you're there. K'Andre in particular, we ask our defensemen to really step up and close out and play tight gaps and try to end plays. And he has a really explosive stride and a long reach that makes it so he can get into guys faster and harder than they expect. And he can use his stick to recover if it doesn't quite go his way. And that combination, he puts himself in position to end a lot of plays for us, which is what we ask our defensemen to do.
So you have potentially 6 more days until the Eastern Conference Finals starts. I'm wondering if you could talk to the food and beverage team at Lenovo Center and maybe have them whip up some kind of weird cup for me to drink out of during the Eastern Conference Final. Is that possible? Do you have the ching or the runway to deal with that?
Yeah, I'll get right on that. We'll have to spend a few days thinking about what that could be, but we'll come up with something.
It's okay. Great. I'm available for consultations if you need any.
If you need any ideas, let me know.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric, man. And I know you're busy, but enjoy the next 5 games until everything starts back up or whatever. It'll be interesting. And I will see you and I will see you in Raleigh.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Hailey Salvian coming up. Stick around. We are joined now by Hailey Salvian from Montreal. The PWHL final between Ottawa and, of course, Montreal begins later tonight. Hailey, hello. You were in the same room, I believe, at the Residence Inn as you were last week. Is that correct?
Yeah. My dog, Bono, and I have been here for maybe 4 days now. It's been a while. Oh, but I was here in the semis before I went to Ottawa, and then
Literally
I came back to the Residence Inn, and they gave me the exact same room.
Enjoyed it so much,
is making me feel like I've been here for weeks.
You're on the hamster wheel, man. It's the way it goes.
It's an honor and a privilege, but I am kind of sick of staring at, the same highway for what feels like an eternity. That is true.
All right, so the final does get started up tonight. We'll talk about that in a second. But I wanted to start with the second round finale between Montreal and Minnesota, which was on Tuesday night.
Yeah.
That was an incredible game. The atmosphere seemed equally incredible. What was it like in the press box? Because it seemed to be pretty loud.
So if I had an Apple Watch or an Oura Ring on, like it would be sending requests for medical assistance. Like I have never felt, my body has never felt like it did watching that game. And it wasn't just because of the stress of it. So I've spoken to players in Montreal about this arena, and just saying like, we have a DJ, the atmosphere is amazing. Like I've had Marie-Philip Poulin before be like, why have you never been to a game here? And I'm just like, I'm going to tell my boss he said that. Don't worry, I'll be there. And then I did an anonymous player poll at the beginning of the year, and Montreal was either loved by players for the atmosphere or actually hated by some players. Like some players straight up were like, I hate playing there. It's way too loud. It stresses me out. And I'm sitting there on whatever day that was, I guess Tuesday. And I'm sitting in my head and thinking like, oh my God, I totally understand how that player feels. Because it's unbelievable, but it's so loud that it truly, when you're filing on deadline and you're like working, it is very stressful. Like the bass from the DJ reverberates in your bones. The fans are so loud. Just the lower bowl was open for the last game. So there was like, I don't know the exact number. It was probably like 6,000-7,000 in the building. And it was a very deafening 6,000-7,000. There was over 11,000 fans at the game at Canadian Tire Center, and it did not feel nearly as loud. And that's not anything against Ottawa fans. I just think the Montreal fans and the atmosphere at Place Bell is so crazy. And then you add in the stress of filing at the buzzer in a 1-1 or a 2-1 hockey game against the defending champs, and you know that everything that you've written could get thrown out by, from one shot by Kendall Coyne Schofield, and you're like, I've never felt so unwell in my life. And like I covered Olympic gold medal games, and I was like, no, I actually can't do this.
So how much do you think that's going to be an advantage here in the final? Like, it feels like of all the teams, the Charge are the ones that no matter what happens, they can just disrupt things, right? Like, oh, you don't want to play up against them. Like, they'll be fine. They'll manage. But do you think this is going to help Montreal in the final?
Yeah, I do think there is, an advantage to that building, at least when we look at some of the stats like that. The Montreal Victoire are unbelievable at home, at least in the regular season. And then I don't remember the exact stat, but in the playoffs, when they score first, or I think just in general, when they score first at Place Bell, I don't think they've ever lost in regulation. So having good starts and having that atmosphere and that fan base behind you is definitely something that Montreal can use. And but in terms of Ottawa as the disruptors, I mean, I did a preview today, and our pal Dom sent me his model stuff, and like Montreal is a 71% chance at winning this series, and Ottawa only has a 29% chance. And to me, like, we love and respect you, Dom, but just throw that out the window. Because the Charge do not see themselves as underdogs. They have defied these exact odds multiple times. Like nobody even expected Ottawa to be in the playoffs externally, from like the fan base to the media. I thought that Ottawa lost more than anybody else did this offseason, and they have managed to get to a second straight Walter Cup final. According to Dom's model, they only had a 17% chance of winning against Boston in 4 games, and they did it. And it's not just because of Gwen Philips, even though she is a superstar. But Ottawa has definitely been the disruptor. They are very hard to play against. Like when I'm sitting and listening to Eric Tulsky talk about how, and I kind of love that it was just like, we're not just a dump and chase team. Like, we want to put the pressure on in whatever way that looks like. And I have always felt that the Ottawa Charge gave me Canes vibes, except they don't have like the same amount of shot attempts or shots on goal like Ottawa really doesn't.
Not the Corsi Charge.
Who does? That's okay,
Corsi Charge
like,
either.
they're not the Corsi Charge, but they are the relentless Charge. Like, and so they're either tough on the walls, tough in the neutral zone, or incredibly fast and dynamic in transition. And so I do see some similarities in the sense that like Ottawa really does, like, they're relentless. They're very physical. They're quick. They're very aggressive. And I do think sometimes that can just come off as like, oh my God, they're the dump and chase, slog it up team. But like, they are, even Montreal coach Corey Chevry said, we are going to have to dig down deep to play against this opponent. And this is coming from the coach who just did something that nobody has ever done in the PWHL, and that's eliminate the Minnesota Frost. So this series is going to be way tighter, I think, than Dom's model projects.
You mentioned Gwen Philips in there, and I'm with you. There's a degree of laziness, I think, when a team with a good goalie, you're like, okay, that's it. That's why they're good. This is the Gwen Philips show or whatever. But it does bear repeating that she's been incredible.
She's unbelievable.
She had 43 saves in the clincher against Boston. She had 30 saves or more in all three of the wins in that series. 4 goals allowed on 193 shots in a 5-game series, which is kind of wild.
Yeah.
And this is obviously not new for her. She was the playoff MVP last year, but is this a player she's going against in the net for Montreal at this point? Like her competition, if you were to try to stratify the goalies league wide, it feels like right now it's Gwen Philips and Ann-Renée Desbiens based on the play over the last 12, 14 months. Is that fair to say? Like, is it like, because it seems like we're going to get some really, really, really high end goalie play in this one because both of those players are just out of their minds right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. If we would have had this conversation with like a month to go in the regular season, it'd be me waffling on like, is it Frankel? Is it Ann? Like, I don't know. And then Gwen Philips goes and emerges the victor in the first goalie battle of the playoffs. And honestly, like, I asked Ann-Renée Desbiens about this because like she is like, when Ann-Renée is on, like, she's got this unbelievable swagger and confidence, and she's a gamer in a way that you sometimes don't see with goalies. Like, if somebody's in her blue, like, she will go out and make the contact and like have like almost like a sassy, like, get the hell out of my crease. And Gwen Philips does that too. So I do think we have like 2 goalies going up against each other who just exude swagger and confidence and personality in a unique way for a goaltender. At least in women's hockey. And but I asked Ann-Renée, like, what excites you about a goalie battle against somebody who won playoff MVP last year? And she was like, I think every single night is a goalie battle in the PWHL. And she's right. But this one in particular is going to be pretty wild. So Gwen Philips in the first round. So last year when she wins playoff MVP, she has a .952 save percentage, and that's despite losing in 4 games in the final, right? A .951 save percentage in the first round. So she is really picking up like right where she left off. And she only allowed 7 goals on 143 shots. Frankel, 9 goals on 93. By the Ottawa Charge. So Gwen has just been phenomenal. And Desbiens is actually really interesting because I don't think she got nearly enough credit this year for putting up all-time league records in wins, save percentage, and goals against average. She had 19 wins. Frankel also had 19, a .955 save percentage, and a 1.1 goals against average. And so I was actually debating between Desbiens and Frankel for MVP. Like, that's how good both these goalies have been this season. And I think a lot of the conversation after the first round, when it came to Ann-Renée, was, well, she let in 5 goals against Minnesota for the first time. And like, I saw some stuff being like, she can't even stop a balloon right now. And it's like, she only allowed, after game 1, she allowed 4 goals on 122 shots.
Mm-hmm.
That is a 967 save percentage in the final 4 games of that series, and she won 3 of them, by the way. So Ann-Renée Desbiens is clicking, Gwen Philips is clicking, and I just think this is going to be like either every game's going to be 2-1. I do wonder if we're going to have like a wild 5-4 game or something where everyone's just like, whatever, wash it, who cares? The next save is the most important save kind of thing. But I'm really excited to see these 2 goalies go at it.
You wrote post game about the inevitability of Marie-Philip Poulin, who of course scores the game winner to put Montreal into the Walter Cup final. That's like a phrase that comes up around certain players. I saw Laz use it in a headline about Nathan MacKinnon. It's all true, but with her, it's particularly true.
Yeah,
she's as clutch as it gets. We're running out of stuff to say about her, I think, in a lot of ways, but she's doing this. I think the variable here is that she's doing it on a knee that clearly isn't 100%. We saw her get hurt pretty seriously in the Olympics, and she still managed to be, a very productive, very, very, very clutch player down the stretch for Montreal. What's the overall state of her game? What are you seeing from her relative to maybe years past? When you factor in whatever she's dealing with on the knee end of things.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing Marie-Philip Poulin play 14 minutes a night. That is incredibly rare, especially in decisive games, like she did in Game 5. But in typical MPP fashion, she's still rising to the occasion, despite the fact that she's not 100% and she's not double shifting and she can't, play as much as she probably wants to right now. And whatever is going on with her injury, it hasn't mattered when it matters most. 14 minutes, she has the primary assist on the opening goal in the first period after Montreal was just totally caved in against the Minnesota Frost. They have a set play on the face-off. She goes to Catherine Dubois, says like, wait here, I'm gonna snap it back for you, put it on net. And Dubois post-game was like, when she tells you what to do, you listen. I did, and I scored. So she gets the primary assist on a huge opening goal, and then she gets the game winner. It's her second game winner of the first round to make it to the finals for the first time. These are best of 5 series, by the way. So 2 of 3 wins were won on Marie-Philip Poulin's stick. That's no surprise. So we're seeing a lot of the same from her. And I think we're seeing her teammates really rally around her. Like there really is just this unspoken thing that Poulin is dealing with. We see Laura Stacey give her their little player of the game cap and, saying this is a player who's had to battle really hard to just even be on the ice with us. And Corey Chevry is talking about how Poulin wants to be at her best all the time. And sometimes that's not possible, but she's still coming through for us. And so we are watching the greatest player to ever play women's hockey battle through something here, coming up huge. And it's all to get, the one kind of major elusive trophy. She didn't win an NCAA championship, but in terms of like the big majors, a Walter Cup's the only thing that's not on Poulin's trophy case. And I think we're seeing her throw everything on the line because I think this is Montreal's best shot. Danielle Sauvageau did a great job going out and signing players in the offseason. You add Abby Rock, and I think this is their best chance to win with MPP still at her peak. And I think we're going to see everybody go all in to try to get her that trophy.
So part of the reason probably feels like this is their best chance too is there's going to be more teams. Vegas and Hamilton are the latest cities to join the PWHL. We have a growing hockey market in Vegas, a non-NHL market in Hamilton. Like, can we get a vibe check on these new teams coming in?
I think the response has been a little it's been interesting. I think there's obviously been a ton of leaks, and we reported Vegas, The Athletic, we reported Vegas, I think, on Tuesday? I don't know what day it is anymore, guys, but we confirmed and reported Vegas. And
some of us don't know what month or what year it is, so don't sweat it.
So 2000 and what year?
16.
16.
Interesting. Can't wait to hear what that's about. It's the reviews have been quite mixed. If you take one look on Twitter, and my Twitter algorithm is just all PWHL fans and PWHL stuff at this point. I think Vegas was a little surprising just because they didn't have a takeover tour game, right? And that goes against the mold of the league saying, wow, look, we sold out this barn. Let's put a team there. But the league still feels really confident that Vegas is ready for a team of its own. And that's a growing hockey market that is obviously a rapidly expanding professional sports hub. Like every team or every league is, going to have a piece of Vegas by 2029 is the NBA could be there. Like all the big four is going to be there. So, Vegas is honestly might get oversaturated by 2029. But it's interesting. And I think there is a lot of excitement about that market. I think it expands the league's footprint to, they're a little bit of, what did they call it? Like the American Southwest is what they said in the press release.
I don't know if that's necessarily the
Southwest. Yeah, the American Southwest is what they said in the press release. To me,
they're not
that's another team.
They're not putting a team in Albuquerque or Santa Fe.
Yeah, right. We're just going westward expansion. Like, let's keep it simple.
Pacific time zone is how I put it.
Correct. Like you're putting another team out there. Obviously travel to some degree was an issue for Vegas, for Vancouver and Seattle last season. It sounds like San Jose could be the fourth team, which would add a fourth, and then maybe the PWHL can do like a Western Conference or a Pacific Division or whatever this ends up looking like. If
Midwest and beyond,
correct. So that'll be their Western Conference, and then everyone else. So I think in that case, Vegas makes a lot of sense. I think it's very interesting that they're getting in there. It's the Vegas Golden Knights are going to play a supporting role. Hamilton, I think the hate for like, I want to post that meme of like the dude with the brave take, because everyone has been slogging Hamilton. And as a Southwestern Ontario girl, Fergus, Ontario, like native, we did not go to Toronto unless there was like a major event.
Unless you were forced.
Or like my grandpa's birthday. My parents both grew up in the city. Like my mom's like a Queen West girly. My dad grew up in Etobicoke. We did not go to Toronto growing up ever because it was just too far and the traffic's too much. We would go to Hamilton. We would go to Burlington, Toronto. Oh no, I'm not getting on the Gardiner or the Lakeshore. No, thank you. So I do think people poo-pooing on the proximity between Hamilton and Toronto just like didn't grow up in Southwestern Ontario and don't understand the horrors of waiting in traffic on the Gardiner because you decided to go to the Eaton Center on a Saturday. It's like highly specific, I know. So I do think a Hamilton team, like that is a $300 million renovated building in a city that will attract fans from London, from Kitchener, from Fergus, from Guelph. Maybe it could siphon support from the Scepters, but the Scepters will be fine. That building is always sold out, and there's tons of fans who can't get in the building, and they're going to pack that place. So they're not, I don't want to say they're untraditional hockey markets. I just don't think it's what people were expecting. And the response has been a little bit of shock just because there's like DC and Denver and Chicago, Pittsburgh, but venue availability has always, and infrastructure has always been the biggest piece of the pie. And if you can't get the dates, if you can't get a practice facility, if you don't have someone who's going to play ball to get you in the building, it's just not going to happen.
What seems certain, next week we're going to have hockey to talk about. I'm sure there'll be more expansion movement. That's just kind of the way things are going. You got a lot on the plate. So we'll catch up next week and see where it all stands.
Me and my one brain cell have a lot going on right now.
Good luck to you both. We will thank you for your time. And thank you to Eric Tulsky. And thank you to Shayna Goldman. And thanks to you fine folks for listening and for watching. Prospect Series is back tomorrow. Montreal Buffalo Game 5. Vegas Anaheim Game 6 are tonight. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you real soon.
Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe and ring the bell to stay informed and catch new episodes every Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And in the meantime, you can join our Discord community. We'll see you there.